And welcome to this presentation about the employment basics for F1 and J1 students. My name is Leandro Di Vittorio, an international student advisor here at Bechtel International Center. And today I'm going to go over, let me move to the agenda. I'm going to go over a few concepts that I want to make sure that you are aware of regarding your options for employment as an international student. First, we want to talk about legal employment, so what you are allowed to do as an international student and how to obtain work authorization as an international student on F or J visa. We will divide it between employment prior to graduation and employment after graduation. Prior to graduation, we want to talk about on-campus employment, curricular practical training or CPT, pre-completion OPT or optional practical training, and academic training for J1 students. Employment after graduation will cover post-completion OPT or optional practical training, and academic training also covers post-completion or after graduation training. And finally, a few words about the Social Security and ITIN number, not that much. We have a presentation only dedicated to that. You can come back to Bechtel.stanford.edu and check that information if you want more. If you want to know more about Social Security or the ITIN. So in this presentation, I will focus mostly on employment. First, let me tell you that the information regarding employment can be found in Bechtel at Bechtel.stanford.edu in the immigration section. And if you go to the employment section, you're going to see the employment workshops. So this presentation will be available there, as well as more information about employment. Next, let me talk about what type of employment you are allowed to do while you are on J or F visa. Employment is heavily regulated on F and J visas, so you have to be careful when you engage in any type of work activity. As a Stanford student, you may have other classmates that are engaging in work authorization or are engaging in work-related activities, but as an F1 student, your ability to do so is heavily regulated by the federal government in the US. So please note that employment is not work in exchange for money, so unpaid or volunteering can also be considered work, and volunteering or unpaid internships also require work authorization. The only type of volunteering that doesn't require work authorization or may not require work authorization is working for a humanitarian cause. If you are helping, for example, working in a soup kitchen to help feed the poor, or building houses for humanity, cleaning a river lands, or any type of activity that includes humanitarian causes, that could be considered volunteering, and that may not be considered work, but every other activity that is related to a degree or is any type of work, or can be considered any type of work, will need work authorization. Any off-campus employment, so anything that you want to do outside of Stanford, and I'm going to talk about what on-campus employment means in a couple of minutes. But any off-campus employment requires work authorization. So never start working and then figure out the work authorization. First, you need the work authorization. So employment from outside of the US cannot be continued without work authorization. If you have a job abroad, if you have your own company, if you have any type of employment or any type of work-related activities before coming to Stanford, before coming to the US, as many of you already heard during orientation, you have to stop that as soon as you enter into the US. You cannot keep working while you are here. Mostly now that most of the jobs are remote, but still you cannot perform those jobs or those work-related activities within the US. Self-employment is also heavily regulated in the US. So creating your own company or working as a freelancer, independent contractor is also a type of work that requires work authorization and is heavily regulated by the federal government. Employment during academic quarters is limited to no more than 20 hours per week. That includes any type of work that you do cannot be more than 20 hours per week, or even less, but depending on university policy. So your department may have a stricter policy. Those who have fellowships or assistantships may be even more restricted. But for immigration purposes, 20 hours is the maximum while you are in class, while the school is in session. F1 students do not qualify for off-campus employment until they have 3 quarters in the US. That means if you started your program in fall, you are not eligible to do any type of work authorization off-campus employment until at least the summer of the first year. That means you have to complete fall, winter, and spring before you're eligible to work off-campus, unless your record was transferred from another institution. That means if you completed another degree on F1 status and your CVS record was transferred to us, you may be eligible. But I will recommend you to touch base with us. Just book an appointment with a student advisor, and we will clarify whether or not you are eligible for any type of work authorization. J1 students are immediately eligible for academic training, so they don't have to meet the 3 quarters rule. And that regardless of whether they're transfer or starting a brand new program on J1 status. Next, let's work about types of unauthorized employment. So what you cannot do, what you have to be careful and not engage in this type of activity. So driving for Uber or Lyft, renting out through Airbnb, babysitting for a professor or anybody in any case, house cleaning, translating text for a local library, editing papers for other students online, working for an outside company doing temporary work on campus, unless you have off-campus work authorization, working for a dorm room, unless you have off-campus work authorization, of course, monetizing an app on YouTube, participating as a research subject, or influencing or coaching. All these type of gigs or activities can be considered work. And you may not engage in those unless you have work authorization. So before you start one of those, please check with us, and we will help you determine if this is allowed. Next, let's talk about the type of work authorization that you have. As I mentioned before, we will divide this in post-completion and pre-completion, but also there's another division: on-campus and off-campus. For F1 students, on-campus employment, basically everything you do on campus is available for you, and you don't require work authorization. All on-campus employment is automatically approved as an F1 student, so you don't have to seek any type of work authorization to work for a staffer or any third party providing services on campus. Off-campus employment is, as I mentioned, is heavily regulated, and there are 2 main forms of work authorization. The first one is called curricular practical training, or CPT, and the other one is optional practical training, or OPT. OPT is subdivided between pre-completion, before graduation, post-completion, after graduation. Additionally, students on a STEM field, I will touch base on that at the end of the presentation, may be eligible to extend their OPT additional time. In the case of J1 students, on-campus employment is also available, but in this particular case, J1 students need work authorization for on-campus employment. So they are not automatically eligible to work. They have to apply for on-campus work authorization at Bechtel. For off-campus work authorization, the only option for J1 students, either pre or post-completion of the program, is academic training. Also requires be authorized to work before starting, but the process is fairly different from F1. So in the case of on-campus employment, I would recommend you to read through Bechtel.stanford.edu. The information there is very clear, step by step, and you will find everything that you need. All the information I'm presenting today will be available there. So I recommend you to go to, again, immigration, the employment section, and then on-campus employment for F and J. all the requirements for on-campus employment is there. So on-campus employment. Well, the on-campus employment requirements are very simple. You cannot work more than 20 hours per week while the school is in session. That means during fall, winter, and spring, not including breaks. But during the breaks and the summer, you may work more than 20 hours per week, depending on what restrictions your department may have. Full-time, I say again, is only allowed during during breaks and the summer quarter. On-campus employment must be provided must provide direct student services. That means that you can either work for Stanford, for the university itself, or any third party that provides services to students on campus. For example, the Starbucks, Treasurside, that's an on-campus job. If you work for any store or restaurant around campus, those are providing services to students, so that's on-campus employment. J1 students must require work authorization before starting on-campus employment. That's directly to Bechtel. Bechtel will approve your on-campus employment. F1 students are not required to request work authorization. So if you get a job on campus, you can start working immediately. Just make sure that it's on campus. So if you have any doubt, contact us first. Academic training, that's for J1 students, right? As I mentioned before, this is either pre or post completion, so there's no difference. Basically, academic training is a period of authorization for off-campus employment done in the US for a US within the US. It means if you're working for a foreign company, that company should be able to operate in the US, have physical office in the US, and be able to hire you in the US. Otherwise, you cannot do academic training with them. Employment must be directly related to the student field of study and can be paid and unpaid. Payment is not relevant in this case, and many cases. With work authorization, the only strict rule, or the main strict rule, is that this has to be related to your degree. So if you're a major in engineering, you cannot do academic training in arts, because what you are here studying is engineering, and you have to train on that field. J1 students may participate in academic training prior to graduation or after the completion of studies for a total of 18 months or the period of their full course of study, whichever is shorter. So if your program lasts more than 18 months, you have 18 months of academic training. If your program is shorter than 18 months, your academic training is the same length of your program. PhD students are eligible for academic training that may last as long as 36 months. So PhD students, the programs tend to be longer, but also they have a maximum of 36 months of academic training. The eligibility for academic training starts with the training opportunity must be directly related to the student's major field of study. So it has to be related to what you're studying here. The student is in a good academic standing, always. The student has a job offer. You have to actually secure the job before you can do academic training. Academic training cannot be used for self-employment. And the student is in a valid J1 status. You have to actually be on the J1 status to do academic training. And the student has health insurance coverage for themselves and any J2 dependents. Finally, the CV's US address in access must be up to date in order to get academic training. And finally, the employment takes place within the US for a company with a US location. Academic training before and after graduation. Before, the student may participate in part-time or 20 hours or less. Immigration-wise, part-time is defined as less than 20 hours or less. Or full-time, anything above 20 hours is considered full-time. So student may work part-time or full-time prior to graduation. Full-time is only allowed during vacation periods of after graduation. So during the academic year, the student must do part-time. academic training. Part-time academic training is deducted from the available academic training at a full-time rate. That means you have 18 months, for example, of academic training. If you're using 2 months of part-time academic training, that's 2 months less that you will have later. So instead of 18, you will have 16 months, regardless of whether it was part-time or full-time. For academic training after your graduation, students must apply for their academic training before they graduate. It's very important that you apply before the end date of your DS 2019. The program and that, or they will lose eligibility to work. So we need to put the academic training on your DS 2019 before the expiration date. Otherwise, you won't be able to do it. The students should apply for academic training as soon as they receive a job offer, ideally not later than 2 to 4 weeks before the graduation date. Of course, you need to give us time to process your request. Since a job offer is required, students should start their job search earlier. So you can start working on that in advance before graduation if you know that you're going to graduate in this quarter or next. The academic training period proof will be reduced by any period of academic training that you used before, which means that if you have used, as I mentioned, if you have used 2 years of academic training, or 2 months of academic training before, you will have only 16 in case your maximum is 18. F1 off-campus employment. Let's talk about CPT first, right? The information about CPT is also found at Bechtel.stanford.edu in the employment section. You're going to see a CPT section. I recommend you to review it. And if you have any questions, you can always come and ask. So off-campus employment, curricular practical training, is a training experience that forms an integral part of the established curriculum. That means this is part of your curriculum. When you're doing CPT, you are training on something that is part of what you're learning, directly related. The employment must be either required of the degree program, mandatory, or may be done for credit. May be offered by the academic department and must receive credit units. This scenario is more common at Stanford. So what it means is there's a specific class that you have to take to do CPT because it has to be part of your curriculum. Usually it's a 1-unit class. And that means that this type of work authorization will allow you to practice where you are learning in your degree. CPT course must be offered by the department and clearly be related to the student's field of study. That means that if there's no CPT course at your department, means you are not allowed to do CPT. In all cases, the training experience must constitute an integral part of an established curriculum. Again, this has to be closely related to your degree. Your department will give you more information about how that is related. And obviously the job that you're looking for must be related to your curriculum. Failure to receive credit will result in a violation of status. So if you are not able to complete this course, which basically is the work authorization that you're seeking for, you will be in violation of your F1 status. So check with your department the conditions for the CPT course before you apply for CPT. CPT eligibility criteria. The student has been in legal status for an academic year, 3 quarters, unless early participation is required by the department. Again, as I mentioned, this is the 3 quarters rule. You have to be in the US on F1 status for 3 quarters before you can apply for CPT. However, some departments may require the student to start working immediately. If this is a requirement from the department, the 3 quarters rule may be waived. RAs and TA-ships or fellowships, if the student has a TA-ship, RA-ship, or a fellowship, the student may not be eligible for curricular practical training during the academic year. That means if you have already worked with authorizations, if you already work with Stanford, you may not be able to do additional curricular practical training. The main reason is the cap, the 20 hours cap. If you're doing a 50% fellowship assistantship already, that's translate into 20 hours per week. So you are capping your amount of hours. Also, some departments may want you to focus on what you're doing and your work, and they might not want you to do additional work on the side. So check with your department restrictions, additional restrictions to your ability to do CPT. A job offer is required. You have to have a job before applying for CPT, and the employment must be clearly related to the student's field study. CPT, a class registration is required. As I mentioned before, one of the conditions for you to do CPT is to be enrolled in one class, a CPT class at Stanford. So that will be the second step after getting the job or job offer. Students may not enroll in the same CPT course more than once unless the department grants course credit for the course when it is taken more than once. Each department works differently, so check with your department. Some departments may prevent you from doing too many CPTs by the availability of the course. So check how many times you can do CPT, check when they are available. Permission to repeat a CPT course more than once varies from department to department. So different departments has different rules. Please check with your department about their policies. Since this is curricular, each curriculum may vary in the way they assess this. Next, students who have already completed all course units required for their degree are in TGR status, are not eligible for curricular practical training unless the CPT is mandatory for the thesis completion. So for those who go into TGR status after they finish their requirements, during TGR, or while you're in TGR, you cannot do CPT unless your thesis requires. And your academic advisor will be able to determine that. So I will say, talk with your advisor. If you're in TGR status right now and you want to apply for CPT, you need to talk with your advisor and determine whether or not your thesis requires you to do CPT. Part-time during school sessions, again, during fall, winter, spring, only 20 hours or less. Full-time during school official holidays and the summer term. So more than 20 hours per week. CPT does not require work permission from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. It requires work authorization or requires approval from Bechtel. So Bechtel is the one issuing the CPT work authorization, not the U.S. government, which shortened considerably the waiting time. The CPT should be endorsed for each employer. If you have several internships, several CPTs, you have to have a CPT work authorization for each of them. CPT done in the final quarter must end on the same day of the final exam. So the last day of classes should be the last day of your CPT. You cannot go beyond that. The CPT I-20 must be received prior to starting employment. Never start working without getting the CPT first. Otherwise, you will be in violation of your F1 status. Next, let's talk about OPT. As you can see on the screen, there are several sections dedicated to OPT. Please check our optional practical training section on Bechtel. That's for the EDU for additional information regarding this type of work authorization. So OPT, optional practical training, is a temporary work authorization that allows you to gain work experience directly related to your major field of study in the U.S. At a U.S. company or organization. Optional practical training requires work permission from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So you are requesting this work authorization directly to the U.S. government, not to Bechtel. Bechtel will participate in the process, but the work authorization will come directly from USCIS. There are three types of OPT: pre-completion OPT before graduation, post-completion OPT after graduation, and post-completion STEM extension after OPT. So after you finish OPT, you can extend your I-20 if you have a STEM major. I will touch base on that at the end of the presentation. The maximum combined time for OPT is 12 months, 36 months if you have the OPT STEM extension, but in general, everybody should apply for the 12 months first and then determine if they have the requirements for the STEM extension. Pre-completion OPT. A student who still has coursework remaining to complete his or her degree program may apply for pre-completion OPT. So until the end of your program, you may apply for pre-completion OPT. I would say if you don't qualify for CPT, you can apply for, or you should apply. But in general, CPT is easier and faster, but it's up to you to decide. This can be part-time during school hours. Again, the 20 hours rule still holds for this, and full-time during school official holidays and breaks. I want to point out that this 20 hours rule is a total number. That means if you have CPT, pre-completion OPT, which is very, I would say extremely rare that you have both on-campus employment, a fellowship, and several types of work, all of them must add to 20, not each of them. So be careful about that. All pre-completion OPT time is counted toward the 12 months maximum. So all the time that you use on pre-completion OPT will be deducted as a 50% rate from your OPT. If you use 3 months of pre-completion OPT, then you will have a month and a half less after you finish your program for post-completion OPT. Students can apply for pre-completion OPT up to 90 days before the requested start date. As I mentioned before, it takes time for you to get this work authorization from the US government, so you can apply as early as 90 days, or you should apply as early as 90 days before you intend to start working. For TER students, a student who has completed all coursework requirements for a degree, but not completed the thesis, dissertation, or equivalent, is in TER status, and may apply for a full-time or part-time pre-completion OPT. So if you're in TER, you can do full-time OPT. TER students must enroll in the 801 or 802 class if participating in OPT during the academic year. So they have to be enrolled, you have to be enrolled in a specific class to participate in OPT, post-completion OPT. There is a chart where you can see the differences or the comparison between CPT and OPT. I will let you check this on your own. You can go to back to the stuff for the EU, the immigration, visa types, F1, J1, and there's a section called student visa, J1 student visa, F1 versus J1 student visa. The chart is there, so you can read it. And if you have any questions, you can always come back and ask. Off-campus employment. So post-completion OPT, a student who has completed all coursework toward his or her degree program may apply for post-completion OPT up to 90 days before the conferral degree date. So this is not 90 days before the start of the work. This is 90 days before the conferral date. Be careful with that. USCIS must receive the application no later than 60 days after the program end date, during the grace period, and provided applicant has not departed the US. So you have within 90 days prior up to 60 days after. That's the application period that you have to apply for OPT. But applicants should apply in mid-March if graduating in mid-June, since the permit takes 3 months to be received. So the application process itself takes around 90 days. I would say don't wait last minute to apply, because if something goes wrong, you may end up without work authorization. Post-completion OPT can only be full-time. That means you need to be working more than 20 hours per week. OPT eligibility criteria. What you need to do in order to be eligible for OPT? Well, first, what you do not need to do. So you are not eligible for OPT if you have not been in legal student status for an academic year. The 3/4 rule apply also here. By the time you want to start working, you have already done 12 months of OPT for the same degree level in another school. If you have a master's already and are a student currently a master's, for example, or the same apply for PhD and bachelor's, if you have done OPT before, 12 months of OPT, you are ineligible to do OPT again at the same degree level. You have completed 12 months of full-time CPT. If you do 12 months of full-time CPT, which is really hard because you can do only full-time CPT during breaks, but PhD students or bachelor students may be able to do so. If you do 12 months of full-time CPT, you forfeit your OPT. So be careful about that. Part-time CPT is not counted, so don't worry about that. You have returned from a leave of absence greater than 5 months, but have not completed one academic year in valid F1 status, which means that if you take a leave of absence for more than 5 months, you get a new service record and your 3/4 rule reset. So you have to meet the 3/4 rule again in order to qualify for OPT. And if the employment is not related to your program of study. You are not eligible for OPT if you have applied for and received approval for a change of status from F1 to any other type of visa. If you get another type of visa in the meantime, while you are a student or after finishing your program, you are no longer eligible for OPT. OPT is only while you are on F1 status. You transfer to another school, we release your service record to another school, and before applying, or even while you are applying, but after you're applying, at the moment we transfer your record to another school, your OPT ends. So you have to be careful about that. And finally, let's talk about the OPT extension to the 48 months for the STEM students. So as I mentioned before, there are 3 types of OPT, right? There are the pre-completion, post-completion, and STEM extension. The STEM extension is a 48 months extension of the OPT for people who are in STEM degrees. So the 12 months limit on F1 optional practical training can be extended for an additional 24 months for a total of 36 months. I don't know what it says, 48 months on top. Sorry, that's a mistake, actually. Combined. For students holding degrees in certain STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, with the following CIP codes. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go and check your I-20. And on the I-20, there's a CIP code. That's the code that identifies your program. That's the code that the US government gives to your degree when we get authorized to provide that degree to international students. And that CIP code determines whether or not your program is STEM related. So as you can see, there's a list that includes the CIP codes that are eligible for STEM extension. Actuarial science, for example, CIP code 52.1304. All the computer science codes, everything that starts with 11 point, XXX, all the 11 CIP codes are eligible, except for the CIP code 11.06 XXX. Engineering codes, all the 14s, all the 15s, all the 26, CIP codes 27, 29, 40, 41, and the medical scientist, master's and PhD, which is a CIP code 51.1410. All of those will be eligible for the STEM extension, but don't worry about that yet. First, apply for OPT, and once you get the OPT, close to the end, 90 days close to the end of the OPT is when you start your extension process, if you are eligible. I will not be covering that in this presentation, just because this is a whole other subject, the STEM extension, and even the OPT application process. We will have webinars and workshops about those two in the future. Please stay tuned. Finally, I'm going to talk about other type of work authorization that exist, but are not covered today. I didn't talk about economic hardship, which is a type of work authorization that you can apply if you are in an economic hardship, if you are having trouble fulfilling your economic needs due to a disaster in your home country or other type of reasons. I will not cover it here because it has a lot of details. It's very rare, honestly. Here at Stanford, I will recommend you, and actually I remember we discussed this morning on the team, that you touch base with your department if you're having any economic hardship, because they may be able to help you before you need to apply for economic hardship. So economic hardship will be a last resource. It's a very complicated process. You have to apply for work authorization to the federal government. So and demonstrate the economic hardship with documentation. So I would say touch base with your department, talk with your student services representative at your department before about your economic hardship before you try this option. But if you want more information, we will be happy to give you more. Working for an international organization. In general, these three options that I want to mention are case specific. So we have to see your specific case to see if you qualify. So that's why providing information now will be a little, it won't work. So working for an international organization like World Bank or International Monetary Fund, if you get a job there, you can apply for a work authorization that is not OPT or CPT related. If you have one of those jobs already, or you get hired by one of those, come and talk to us and we will give you more information. And finally, experimental learning. I will let you go to back to the stuff for the EDU and check the information about experimental learning to see what are the elements of this type of work. So I try to conclude within 20 minutes, 20 minutes before 5, to give you time for questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the Q&A section right now. So I'm going to read through the questions. If you have any questions, just please put it on the Q&A and I will make sure to answer it. Are you saying that we can get off-campus work authorization exclusively from Bechtel, no USCIS included? Not necessarily. It depends of the type of work authorization. Again, CPT or academic training comes from Bechtel. We issue the work authorization under, of course, the regulation of the federal government. But OPT, post-completion or pre-completion of post-completion OPT comes from USCIS. So we help you apply. We have to give you a recommendation, I-20, for OPT, but the application goes to USCIS and they determine your eligibility. They are the ones approving your OPT. On-campus employment for J1 students, they need approval from us. On-campus employment, no approval. You are eligible immediately upon arrival for any job on campus. I'm struggling to understand where we should go to initiate the I-team process. I call the acceptance agent and they don't understand how they can help me. I don't think to understand your question. So I would say if you are applying for an I-team and you have any questions, send me an email. Send us an email to international students at Stanford EDU, and I will make sure to answer and give you all the resources for your I-team application. So I'm just starting a company in my second year PhD, and it's directly related to my course of study. Are you saying this is illegal? My co-founder is American. I like the fact that everybody's saying, are you saying? Yes. So creating a company is not necessarily legal. Owning a company is not necessarily illegal. Working for that company may be illegal if you don't have work authorization. So if your company, if you have a co-founder that is in another type of visa or US citizen, permanent resident, any type of visa other than F1, that person may operate that company. And you can be owner, you can own the company, but you cannot participate in the daily operation of that company without work authorization. Again, pre-completion and post-completion OPT, if you are on F1 visa, will allow you to work for that company. CPT won't, but you will need to request the work authorization prior to start working for that company. So it's not illegal per se, but you have to be authorized to work in order to start operating the company. Let me see, next question. When should we start looking into CPT? Well, after 3 quarters in the US, definitely, unless your department requires you to do CPT, but I don't think many departments do here at Stanford, only I think education may do. But in order to apply for CPT, CPT is given within the quarter. So I would say as early as you can register for classes during a particular term that you want to work is the earliest you should start your CPT process. So I would say, because the first step after getting the job, of course, is enrolling the CPT course for that quarter that you want to work. So if you're planning to work, for example, in summer, many people do, you can start looking for jobs. Looking for jobs is not legal. You can apply for jobs and even secure the job, but starting working is different. So you can start applying for jobs and securing the job. And then when registration is open for summer, you register in the CPT class for summer. And apply for CPT immediately after. So that will be the deadline. If I work on campus for 8 hours per week as a F1 student, does that cut into my OPT or CPT allocation number of months? No. On-campus employment doesn't affect CPT or OPT eligibility. The only thing that, or the number of months that you will have to do OPT, the only part where this will be affected is the 20 hours per week. So if you're working 8 hours on campus and you apply for CPT, and this is, for example, fall or spring, you have only 20 hours, right? And you are already working 8 hours on campus. That means that your CPT cannot be more than 12. Or pre-completion OPT cannot be more than 12. If you're doing this during summer, your cap goes to 40, so you don't have that problem. For freshmen, when should we declare a major in order to be eligible for CPT? Yes, that's a great question. Yes, as an undergrad freshman, you have to declare major in order to apply for CPT. The reason is this has to be related to your degree. But if we don't know what your degree is, we cannot prove that in your CPT application. So your major has to be declared in order for you to apply for CPT. Hi, just wondering, as a graduate PhD student with F1 status, do I need to apply for OPT if I want to work as a postdoc at another university in the US? The key here is another university. Yes, if you want to work as a postdoc in another university, you say after graduation, PhD student with F1, do I need to apply? If this is after graduation, you have to apply for post-completion OPT. If it is before graduation, you may apply for OPT, pre-completion OPT or CPT, depending on your position, how the position is structured. CPT may work. If this position can be within a term, CPT may work. Currently, my I-20 has general studies. So would I need a new one before OPT? Not before OPT, but in general, I mean, if you're applying for pre-completion OPT, yes, because you need to declare a major, the same question as before. And by the time you apply for post-completion OPT, you probably already declared your major a long time ago, of course. So I would say yes. Yes, the answer is actually yes. Meant to say OPT, not CPT. Okay, that's a clarification. Yeah, in that case for CPT, yes. Do pre-completion OPT requires job offer? Also, how to count the actual time used for my 12 months quota? Let me see. Also, how do I count the actual time used for my 12-month quota? Can I apply for OPT first, then start finding internships for the summer? I would say you have to have the job because your pre-completion OPT will be based on your start date, right? So I don't think to understand completely your question, so I would give you an answer, but if it's not good, please reply back or send me an email. And about the quota, you just count the months. You're applying on a monthly basis. For example, you're applying for a month of OPT, pre-completion OPT right now. That means you have only 11 months for post-completion OPT. And when you apply for OPT, you get an EAD card. That's very important piece of information. And that EAD card has the start and end date. So with that card, you can track how much OPT you have done. And once you apply for the post-completion OPT at the end of your program, you will be providing copies, and actually USCIS has them, of all your EAD card. So you will know how much you have done and how much to apply for. And in any case, I've seen people applying for more and even getting the right amount. I don't recommend you to do that because that may delay your process, but USCIS knows how much OPT you have done. I don't think I have any other question. Oh, do pre-completion OPT? Oh, sorry. Can I apply for OPT for? Oh, yeah, no, that question I already answered. So I don't have any other questions here. Let me see. Yeah, no. So if you have more questions, please write it. If not, thank you very much for coming today. We have 10 more minutes. So if you have any other question, I will be happy to answer. If not, please review this information on bechtel.stanford.edu. Additional information is also there. This presentation will be available if you want to revisit it. And please stay tuned to our newsletter so you can get more information on future workshops. And just a quick note that the winter break is coming. And if you have plans to travel, I just want to add that you should have a travel signature on the second page of your I-20. If you don't, we will be providing that signature at Bechtel. So you have to come. You cannot just go and figure out later. You have to come to Bechtel and to request a signature before traveling abroad. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great evening. I will allow these last 9 minutes for more questions, but if not, oh yeah, I saw that. Because we need to reserve 90 days to process pre-completion OPT, I worried I have not yet confirmed my job start date for the intern. Okay, yeah, well, I would say it's advisable because you have to send the offer letter with your OPT so you get approved on time. And you have to choose the start date. And without the job, it's hard to choose the start date. So I would recommend you to secure the job before you apply for OPT. Anything else? Let me click here, answer live. Yes. Well, no more questions. I will stop the recording. And yeah. If no more questions, thank you very much for coming, and I hope you all have a great day.